Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to look at section 4.2, European nations settle North America. So the first section on your guided reading is about New France. Now, New France had quite a few explorers. Your textbook talks about a few of them, but for our purposes, I want you to know one of these explorers. His name is Samuel de Champlain. And what did he do? Well, he did a couple things. That's a picture of him right down there in the bottom right-hand corner. So besides have marvelous facial hair, he also sailed up the St. Lawrence River, and he established and founded the city of Quebec, the settlement of Quebec. And there's a picture of old Quebec. This became the base of New France. This was like their sort of capital city, capital town outpost for their colony in North America. Here's a map showing what New France looks like around the time of 1750. Notice the French territories are in blue. And this is a huge area. If you look over all the way up into the northern part, that's even further north than Newfoundland, spans all the way west up into parts of Canada up that way, and then all the way south, all the way down to New Orleans. So this was a very large area, encompassed all the Great Lakes, and it was a very important colony for France. So let's talk about some of the reasons for the French exploration. First of all, early on, they were trying to find a sea route to the Pacific. Now, several of the other Europeans, like the Spanish, had been trying to find a route to the Pacific going south around Southern America. Now, some of the French said, hey, maybe we can do it going around the northern part of North America. And so that was what they originally intended. They didn't really find that, though, because there's too much land and it's too cold and too much ice. So shortly after that, they started to turn to trade, and especially the fur trade. As you can see over the one picture here illustrates some of the furs that are being traded, but the furs were important because they were part of the fashion and the style that people use in a lot of different ways, but including in hats. And that's why I have a picture of some of the hats that they would use furs to make or to line them with to keep them warm. Another reason for exploration was to convert Native Americans to Christianity. There were French missionaries, and that was their main goal while they were there. Now, one thing that's important to kind of understand about New France is that one of their reasons for settling or exploring was not to build many large towns or raise families. You typically had missionaries or younger men to middle-aged men. Now, there were some women, but the idea here wasn't to set up a family, build up a new colony, build up a new society or anything like that. The mission sort of was to get paid, was to work on the fur trade or maybe convert people. People sometimes spent their whole lives there. Sometimes they'd go for a few years and then leave New France and go somewhere else. Now, number 2 is about Jamestown, named after none other than this gentleman over here. This is King James from England. So the founder is actually called the London Company. This was a group of investors. You find this pattern a lot. There's companies that go to set up trading posts or take over certain areas, and they have investors. People put up money to help pay for the cost, and hopefully some of the trade that company does will make a lot of money for the investors. But Jamestown not only was founded by this London investment company, but it was also set up by King James. So these companies oftentimes need to get permission from the monarch or from whoever's in charge in that country. And in England, that was King James. He granted a charter for the London Company so that they could set up a colony over in North America. Now, Jamestown was a pretty significant colony for the English. First of all, it showed us that it was not going to be easy for Europeans to settle, particularly in North America. And Jamestown is a great example of that, because that first winter was a disaster. Many people died. A lot of the people that went over there had no real experience farming. They thought they were going to show up, get off of a ship, and start finding gold, which there wasn't any of in Virginia where they set up this colony. So the first winter was a disaster. But luckily, some of the people were able to survive. Not everyone died. And so they began to set up their first permanent settlement. This picture that I have here is from recreations of what some of their houses may have looked like in the Jamestown colony. Slowly but surely, they start to build up a settlement there. And eventually, Jamestown is going to become very profitable. And you all read the textbook, so you know why. This little leaf is going to bring a lot of money for Jamestown and earn a lot of money. It's tobacco. Jamestown starts growing tobacco, and once tobacco kind of catches on as a craze in the European societies, Jamestown becomes a very profitable colony. The next colony we're going to talk about is Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay colonies. These are two different colonies, but we're going to lump them sort of together here because they're similar in certain ways. First of all, they're settlers. You've heard of some of the Pilgrims before from the so-called Thanksgiving story from North America, but you may have heard of the Puritans before. The Puritans and Pilgrims were both religious groups. They were seeking to set up religious societies. Okay, so one of their ideas was to build a model community based on religion. The Puritans felt that the religion practiced in England was not pure enough. And so they had some very strong rules: no alcohol, no gambling, mandatory church attendance, so on and so forth. They decided that they weren't fitting in well in Europe, and so they came to North America to build a community based on religion, and Pilgrims were quite similar that way too. One thing that's different about them than the French is that they want to build a new society. They want to have families, so lots of women come over and they start having children with their husbands, right? So this isn't just an idea here to get rich and to get paid. The idea about some of the English settlers, especially these religious groups, is to build up a society, an ideal religious society with lots of families and lots of children. The last colony we're going to talk about is New Netherlands. Now, New Netherlands is kind of interesting because it has later turned into something else which we know of very well. And I'll get to that in just a second. But the area where the Dutch were claiming land, remember, if you're Dutch, you're from Holland or sometimes called the Netherlands, was around the Hudson Bay area. This is modern-day New York. This New York was originally called New Amsterdam, and it was the center for the New Netherlands colony in North America. Now, the Dutch, just like the French, wanted to trade. Okay, so they were trading in furs, they were interacting with the natives, they were working with each other in order to be able to acquire furs from the natives. The Dutch would work with them and then send them over to Europe. These Dutch colonists did set up permanent colonies. So they weren't just wandering the wilderness looking for furs. They set up cities and colonies just like the English. Initially, those colonies were for the Dutch, but they were kind of having trouble getting Dutch people to come over, and so what they decided to do was open up their colony. They said people from anywhere could come, people that were living in what is now modern-day Germany, or Sweden, or Denmark. Anyone could come if they wanted to work and establish this colony. And that kind of started a pattern. New York is still the same way today. There's people there from all over the world, and people have gone there for centuries now, looking for a new life in what eventually became part of the United States. Okay, thanks for listening, and see you in class tomorrow.